Well, the Titans fall in their first preseason game, but maybe even more important was the play of quarterback Cam Ward and some of the other position groups. We break it all down here on the Titans Squad Show.
Tighten up. It's the Titans Squad. Sponsored by Gametime. Everything Tennessee Titans every week. Covering all the big hits and game-changing plays from the heart of Music City. The way only the Locked On Podcast Network can. Squad up. The Titans Squad Show starts now.
And welcome to the Titans Squad Show. I'm your host, Julian Minenzone, alongside former Pro Bowler, Mr. Brad Hopkins. B-Hop, how you feeling? First Titans game, at least preseason game, is in the books and a lot to look at. How'd you feel about it?
Well, first off, you did a great job on Channel 2 tonight.
Thank you.
Breaking down the Saturday events, and that's pretty cool to hear you on there. And your assessment of it was correct. There's a lot of promise, a lot of potential. Although we didn't see a Titans win, there's a lot to, at least in that second drive, and we'll break it down here in just a few minutes, to be hopeful for, that this season can be a lot different than the one that allowed them to pick first in the draft last year.
Yeah, and that's where I wanted to start is Cam Ward. There's a lot to look at in the preseason, not just Cam Ward, but all eyes were on him being the number one pick, the quarterback of this team. Cam finished 5 for 8, 67 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions, but he did lead the Titans to a touchdown on that second drive. What were your big takeaways from Ward's debut?
I would say his poise in the pocket, his confidence in leading that team. He actually, at most points, didn't look like a rookie. Of course, we did see a holding call that kind of put them in the hole a little bit, and no offense wants to try and dial up third and long or whatever else. So the first drive resulted in a 3-and-out, and this was after we saw the Buccaneers kind of moving the ball at will a little bit. Kyle Trask was finding, holes in the defense to find receivers, and he was moving the ball rather efficiently. But at least the defense held to a field goal. So getting off the field, 3 down 3-0 before the Titans finally put together a drive that culminated in a Tony Pollard touchdown. It was good to see. It was good to see them put that slow start in the rear view. Cam came out, and like I said, the pocket was his to manage. Even when he had to escape Julian, he was still looking downfield for potential receivers, which is what I like. A lot of rookies that we saw, a lot of young players that we saw today in this first week of preseason, when they got outside the pocket, they were looking downfield because that's probably naturally what they're used to being able to do, right? Well, this guy is saying, hey, look, my biggest plays are to be made, in the receiving end. So let's go ahead and see if we can extend this play. And when he worked outside the pocket, I saw him being efficient, as well as being a guy that, didn't mind taking some chances and hitting a few receivers through the hair of his chinny chin. You know what I'm saying? He did some really good things in there. So I liked it a lot better than what we saw in after the first public practice that we saw at Nissan Stadium. He kind of struggled a little bit, right? And even as of Thursday, they were talking about, Cali having to get on him a little bit the way they ended practice. Well, it seems like they got a lot out of the joint practices against the Buccaneers, which is probably where most of the work was done, right? Because we only saw a series and a half, or at least 2 series from Cam before he came out of the game. But seemed like they got a lot of good work out of it. They got to see themselves compete. They got to be in a situation that, that allowed them to kind of come together, right? Develop that cohesion, which is important. So I thought this trip was, I would give it probably a B+.
B+. Hey, that's C's get degrees, so B+ you'll take it, especially in the first preseason game. But 2 things that really stuck out to me, B-Hop. That first drive where they go 3-and-out, that third down play where Ward was kind of scrambling out of the pocket, looking downfield, like you said, he threw it away. Last year, how many times did we see 3rd and 10 become 4th and 17? And that's a big step in the poise direction that you were talking about, not making, a bad play or a broken down play even worse.
Yeah, and not comparing Cam to Will and starting that whole situation all over again. But it just seemed like Will was trying too hard. You know what I mean? And he was trying so hard to make the big play. And a lot of times, like we saw that caption of Cali last year, what are you doing? You know what I mean? It's like, what's the deal? So stop making those kind of crucial mistakes that ultimately end up making it worse. Well, one thing we didn't see, and actually, you know what, Julian, the thing that stood out to me most was one thing that he said during your broadcast. during the clip of him at the podium, he said they didn't have any MAs. And for those of you that don't know, that's missed assignments. Do you know how crucial that actually is, especially for a first preseason game where you saw the number ones go out there and function without making a bunch of mistakes? Sure, there's a holding call, but that's going to happen. It can happen at any time during the season. There's holding calls in the Super Bowl, for goodness sake, right? But at the end of the day, they weren't doing things that shoot themselves in the foot. And that has been problematic for this team, in recent history. So that was good to see them being very cognizant of not making those mistakes that ultimately put them in the hole.
And then the second thing I wanted to point out is, yes, they go 3 and out, right? But maybe more so than starting out strong on a first drive, I'm more impressed with the way they bounce back, not only a bounce back drive, but a drive after a score as well, for him to settle in, go to the guy that's been working with him all off season long in Calvin Ridley. I think he found him about 3 times over that drive, and lead the team down the field and also score in the red zone. I mean, this team was in the bottom third of the NFL last year in red zone scoring percentage. There may have been a couple games last year, at least two or three, that you could have said maybe the Titans were in that game if they just took the points that were there. And tonight, at least in that specific drive, he showed what he can do after having their backs against the wall. And I think that shows a lot. It shows a lot of grit by Cam.
It really does. It shows a lot of poise, which is what you want to have for your leader. If you look at the minutes, I think that they had the ball for 22 minutes versus the Titans 3 minutes, 143 yards to 5 yards in essence. When you're talking about losing the time of possession game, that means your offense is staying on the sideline getting cold. So I think despite all the issues, despite the shortcomings that they had to overcome, you saw them remain focused. And this was without some of the heavy hitters. We didn't see Lloyd Cushenberry in there. We didn't see Kevin Zeitler in there, right? We didn't see L'Jarius Sneed. We didn't see Tavondre Sweat and Big Jeff. We didn't see most of – and guess what? Obviously on the other side of that, we didn't see Baker Mayfield. We didn't see a bunch of their starters either. I understand that. But the guys were able to actually go out there and compete and make a game of it early on when it really mattered, before it started getting sloppy and you started seeing the backups getting in there trying to make a roster. Then it kind of got a little ugly, kind of got a little away from the Titans. Then Tim Boyle, I'm sure he wished he could have had a couple throws back, throws a game on pick 6, which I will say he made a tremendous effort. And I thought he might have just almost knocked that ball out of the dude's hands before he crossed the goal line, but yet throw a pick 6. At least he was the last guy to at least put a hand on the defender before he crossed the goal line. So I'll give him credit for that.
I want to get your opinion on this. And I don't know if this is me looking into it too much as a media member, just trying to grab for straws at storylines. But Cam Ward showing up 6 hours early to his first preseason game. That's what he did tonight. He went through his warmups. He said it's kind of what he did in college. He watched a movie. He said it was a John Cena movie, Freelance. I looked that up. It's got 10% on Rotten Tomatoes, so it's not a good movie. But it was a part of a pregame routine that had him there 6 hours before kickoff. Is that rookie excitement? Is that just how this dude is wired? Because you see like guys like LeBron and Kobe Bryant or Derek Jeter, guys like that show up to the field of play or the court, hours and hours beforehand. Is that a good sign that this guy is just wired different, or is it maybe just, hey, first preseason game, first NFL debut? I want to do well, so let's study a little bit extra before the test.
Well, you just said it. First off, it's part of his process. Is it unique? No, it's not unique. I remember when I was a rookie and I was starting next to Bruce and Munch and all those other guys, we wouldn't wait for the first bus to leave the hotel to go to the stadium. We'd take a cab. And we took cabs because we wanted to get there before anybody else got there, before the line started forming for the dudes to get their ankles and wrists taped, right? We were already there. We already got our ankles taped. We probably already been out on the field, walking around a little bit, had our first cup of coffee over there, had your first movement, get the anxiety out, so everything was everything. But you got to get there early to be able to have it be less manic when everybody arrives, because, it's a different atmosphere when the entire locker room shows up versus when you have it to yourself. And I would imagine him able to read a book or him being able to watch a movie it just kind of calmed things for me. It was less anxious. And you know what? I'm glad you brought that up, because maybe that's the thing that led to the poise that we talked about earlier. The fact that he was able to still tap into that process that he found a lot of success in Miami doing, right? Almost like Tajay going out into the field barefoot so he can feel the grass, all that good stuff, right? I guarantee you he did that. Well, it's just one of his processes, Cam Ward's, to where he could just go out there and make this a normal situation. That's all he wanted to do. He didn't want to make this moment bigger than it actually was. And we know this is just a preseason game. But, when you find success doing something, you tend to stick with it until you have to do something else.
It seems like the character stuff and the work ethic stuff, I feel like a lot of times as a rookie, at least, you either have that or you don't. And it feels like Cam does. And so then the character, everybody's waiting for the results to match the character. The results aren't going to happen at least right away. Remember, this guy is still young. He's in his first couple months of the job. I would attest it as the first 2 or 3 weeks of the job, really, at the NFL level, where you're getting hit at least consistently. But at least that part, the 5 a.m. workout stuff, the leadership, the culture setting stuff, that's all. We don't have to worry about that with him, at least, it seems like.
Quarterbacks can't be like everybody else. I know it sounds crazy to say because they want to be able to fit in. They want to have that same cohesion with the unit, right? But there is a bigger expectation for the guy that has the most responsibility. And you can't be down here making mistakes and doing all those silly things that youngsters tend to do. So as a rookie that's in the position that he's in, where he has to be the leader, you've got to do leadership things. Leadership doesn't matter how old you are. Leadership doesn't matter how much experience you do or don't have. You've got to be able to check those boxes of being a leader. And I think that to this point, we've seen him do a lot of things. I'm not going to sit here and anoint him rookie of the year and all this other stuff just yet, But what you just said are the intangibles that it takes to be that guy. And the same can be held true for a dude that has experience and coming into a new roster, right? I mean, let's look around the league. Look at Sam Darnold going to Seattle. You think there's not an expectation for him to come in and do some things?
Right.
You know what I mean? When you look at who a leader is, doesn't matter what your age is. You have to be able to at least convince the huddle, those other dudes that are in it, that, you're the one that belongs here calling the plays. Because guess what? The huddle can smell a fraud. And you don't want that, because that's when they start looking around. But you know what? Coaches do a good job of recognizing the fakers, the ones that just don't have all the things to lead a team. And the next are the guys that are blocking and catching and running for that guy too. So a fraud can be easily determined, or he can be lifted up because people believe early on that this is the guy. We found our guy.
You know what? I did want to give a shout out because they talked about it in the post game, at least in Callahan and Ward's post game too. That the O-line on that protection of that first completion, that 25-yard completion to Ridley, which was Cam's first completion of the game. He was protected forever back there. And it was nice, after a season where the quarterbacks seem to be running for their lives too. I think the ghost of Nicolas Petit-Frere is still haunting Titans fans to this day. So the fact that though Cushenberry was not there and Zeitler was not there, it was still a welcome sign in a small sample size.
No, completely. They were balanced. They gave Cam enough time in the pocket, especially in that second drive, to find receivers, particularly Calvin Ridley, 3 for 3 for 50 yards. That was nice. I expect him to bump his head on the goalpost sooner than later, especially with that combination. And he went to him early, found him early. Even though he went to Van Jefferson first for an incompletion, able to scan the field a little bit. The reason why he was able to do that is because the line blocked up front, which is great. You like to see that. But they also opened up some holes in the run game, a little bit. Tony Pollard, 4 carries for 9 yards? Not a whole bunch, but at the end of the day, he did score the Titans' only touchdown. So him being able to find the end zone was because of, first off, a good second effort, but bodies on bodies. We saw guys out there. I will say that one play that you talked about where he got flushed to his right and was thrown along the sideline, didn't make a completion, but that was because he got spooked by the rush a little bit. But the rush did kind of settle in to secure the pocket, and they did more of that than be a liability, which is what you want to see. I remember watching your boy, Corey Curtis, in the very beginning of the game, talking about things he wanted to watch, right?
Yeah.
Offensive line play was one of them. Being able to give the quarterback some consistent looks downfield, an opportunity to run the offense without being under pressure, that's a huge thing. Now, did you see the Buccaneers dialing up a bunch of stuff? No. They were doing stunts up front, but for the most part, they just brought forward. Every now and then you bring an extra dude, have somebody staying in the A-gap, but for the most part, they did a good job of passing off the stunts that the line was trying to do against them and recognizing how to keep the protection intact. And if need be, Cam could have checked into something else, and we saw him do that. I love to see him operate at two different levels also, under center and in the gun. He did a really good job of play action, but also setting up what could potentially be, some big plays downfield. So there was a lot to be excited about.
Certainly a lot to be excited about. On the other side of the break, we're going to talk about maybe the backup QB spots and should the Titans go after somebody given the sample size of what we got today. That's next on the Titan Squad Show. Keep it here. All right. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? Well, with Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. Such as myself, I have a bunch of streaming services. They're charging me left and right. And so Monarch Money can help track all of that spending on my end. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. And this episode is also presented by Yahoo Fantasy. It's the best time of year. NFL kickoff is almost here, and that means fantasy football season is back in full swing. And this year, Yahoo Fantasy is turning things up with a fantasy football experience like never before. This year, me and the Titan Squad Show are playing on Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your millionth league. I've used Yahoo Fantasy for years. Love the updates they're rolling out this month. They're wild in the best of ways, of course, as you get ready for draft day. I know I am. And to celebrate 28 years of fantasy football greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days throughout August. To kick it off, they just dropped Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine Leagues, a killer new way to play fantasy football on Yahoo, where the lowest scoring team gets eliminated each week until there's one team left standing. And with the season around the corner, now's the time to get your league together and give this new mode a try. If you're more into the classics, you can still play head-to-head private leagues or join a public league. Stay tuned for more killer announcements and start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football now at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. All right, B-Hop. So we're back. A lot of the comments, at least that we're already getting in this show that I've seen, are about Tim Boyle and the backup QB spot. Brandon Allen had a pick. Tim Boyle had two. I know you talked about it in the last segment. Based on what you saw tonight, I know it's the first preseason game, but should the Titans be content with what they have at backup quarterback? Because you never know what could happen. On one side, you can look at it and say, if Cam Ward goes down, should they want to win those games anyway? But my whole thing, and I think we've talked about this before, is I can't imagine that having Cam Ward, a new GM, and trying to build this winning culture that you want to build here in Tennessee would lend itself to throwing games by not putting the best quarterback out there possible, unless they really think that those two guys are the best that they could do at this time. But what's your take on the whole backup quarterback situation for what you saw tonight?
Sucks to go last. Think about what I said. It sucks to go last. You know why it sucks to go last? Because you're not playing with the best guys out there.
Yeah.
You have to earn the opportunity to go with the best, to be put in a better situation. You know what I mean? You have to be better in camp. You have to show yourself to be more competitive. And that way you get to run with the ones. There's a reason why there are 1s, 2s, 3s, and so on. And when you're in Tim Boyle's situation where you're working with, arguably the guys that are struggling the most, the guys that make the most mistakes, the guys that do have those MAs, the guys that just won't even probably be on the roster in about 3 weeks. That's who he has to work with. I'm not making that as an excuse for everything, but because we did see a couple of late balls that resulted in picks and stuff like that, and saw tremendous effort. But at the end of the day, would Tim Boyle have been better if he was working with the ones? I would assume so. Because most quarterbacks are better when they have the best opportunity to do their job. And that's one thing that we talked about today, was we talked about how well the offensive line worked for Cam Ward. I would imagine that same effort would have been for Tim Boyle as well. Now, maybe if he had the same kind of success, we don't know. We really don't. But unless we start to see those quarterbacks being interchanged in the same situation, in other words, blocking, with the same line, having Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears behind them, it's almost not even comparable. You know what I mean? Because how effective would Cam Ward have been if he went out there with the 2s and 3s?
Sure.
You know what I mean? They wouldn't do that. Matter of fact, it was made mention during the broadcast. If Cam Ward's butt is out there, guess what? The starters are going to be out there. Besides the ones that got the break off, Lloyd Cushenberry, Kevin Zeitler, they weren't out there. Guys 14 years in the league. Why the hell do he need to be in a preseason game? You know what I mean? At least early on. Lloyd Cushenberry, why risk injury for a guy that's trying to recover and be as best position he can be for the regular season, not the preseason? So you understand that. But when we saw JC out there, he was very, very effective. Peter Skoronski was balling out there. Shoot, Dan Moore looked pretty good. You know what I mean? I thought that Dan Moore, I got to admit it. I forgot that Dan Moore isn't as veteran experienced as I would have thought.
No, he's 27, 28, something like that.
5 years experience. Not to say that that's, but when he's still learning from Bill Callahan and company, that means there's room for improvement, right? But those guys got out there and they balled, man. They did pretty good. You know what I mean? Given the circumstances. So by wrapping it up about Tim Boyle, we did see some things that obviously, need to compete better than that, bro. You know what I mean? Because the game kind of got away and you were the one that was under center when it was going down. But, for the most part, I think that any backup is a backup for a reason. If not, he'd be starting someplace. But we're not going to have the mentality that if Cam goes down, there goes the season. I guess we just stop winning ball games. No, it's just, as callous as it may sound, if Cam goes down, oh, well, this is called football, man. Injuries are inevitable. And that next guy up, that's his time to shine. You know what I mean? That's how people get discovered. How did Tom Brady get discovered? Drew Bledsoe got hurt. You see what I'm saying? How do tons of guys how did Brock Purdy get discovered? Jimmy Garoppolo got hurt. So that's what happens. Next man up mentality creates the opportunity for somebody to go out there and become the next dude.
Brandon Allen, for context, 6 of 12, 62 yards, a pick, and Tim Boyle, 4 of 13, 24 yards, 2 interceptions. A lot of comments going on here in our chat also about Tajay Spears. Suffered what looks like, at least the reports, high ankle sprain.
That was that one the guy said, can you put a Guardian suit on him?
Yeah. Keep those comments coming. We love to see those comments. Yeah, somebody put a Guardian cap suit on. Can we put Tajay Spears in it? That was from Trey Phipps here. You talk about the next man up mentality, and if Spears is going to be out at least for the preseason, you want to try to keep him healthy, because obviously health has been important when it comes to his aspect of the game. Maybe some more opportunities for a Julius Chestnut or a Khalil Mullings to try to get some reps here in preseason to show what they could do.
100%. Khalil Mullings led the dang team in rushing. 33 yards didn't seem like a whole bunch, but for the opportunity he got to be in the game, it's not bad. This is going to be Tony Pollard's offense. Obviously, I think that what they're going to do is reduce his workload by involving Tajay Spears more. And it is unfortunate that he carted off, but hopefully that was more precautionary than anything. If you got the technology to cart a guy, I'll go ahead and cart him off, and he's not going to see the rest of the game anyway. So it is what it is, But hopefully it's not long lasting, and it's hoping that, if we're lucky, he'll get into some Falcon reps. But if not, it's okay, because he's going to be your legit number 2, right?
Right.
But that does give opportunity for Mullings, for Chestnut, for players like that to get more opportunity to touch the rock, show what they can actually do. This isn't going to be a four deep running back room. It's just not. You know what I mean? But there are those guys that are still in the locker room. Guess what? Their job is probably more special teams than anything else, because you got to have guys on cover teams and on the position game. But hopefully Tajay can continue to get better like he has been. He's shown a lot of promise, a lot of potential. As a matter of fact, his name was on the tip of Callie's tongue for most of the conversation we were having during training camp about guys that have shown up and have become really engaged and involved in what they're doing offensively.
Yeah, he had a great bursts of speed throughout some of the practices, at least the open ones that we were watching. He was pretty good. Now, I it's funny when you mentioned Tajay Spears and then of course Tony Pollard. This is him. It being his offense. It took me back to the conversation that we had a few episodes ago about how last year when they threw the ball 4 straight times at the goal line against the Lions, and then tonight, the learning lessons and learning tools that you use. Who was your best offensive player last year? Well, it was Tony Pollard. And what do? You hand it off to Tony Pollard to get you home and get you in the end zone. It's baby steps, but at least there was some growth on doing the obvious. It felt like, at least in a, again, small sample size first preseason game situation.
You know what, man? Trey Phipps is on the chat, and he's bringing the heat, because check this out. He said Zeke on a 1-year deal. Cheap? Think about it. You can
let's show that comment right there. Call me crazy, but do we go sign Zeke Elliott?
Right. Zeke Elliott and Tony Pollard back in the backfield again. They shared the backfield before. You know what I mean? Tony Pollard, they kind of put him on the steps, so that, but okay, so we're getting ahead of ourselves.
Sure.
We're assuming now that we're not going to see Tajay Spears in the lineup.
Yeah.
Let's let the injury report come out and tell us what's going on before we start bringing in free agents. You know what I mean?
Man, Trey Phipps is active today. He's active here today.
Yeah,
but Tony Pollard. The hope is that you keep Tajay Spears healthy, because the idea from Brian Callahan was that you kind of balance out the workload a little bit, because Tony Pollard by the end of last season was a little banged up. And so
100%.
that's I think the biggest concern, not seeing any injury report, not, maybe just hoping for not the worst, I guess, when it comes to Tajay Spears, but he has had, health concerns. That's something that you want to at least keep in mind for the big picture kind of situation when at running back there.
Well, you got to also think about him being, especially when they run 11 personnel and you've got 3 receivers, he becomes the 4th. Tajay Spears does. Not that Tony Pollard isn't, but when you look at the receptions, I think that I think what was it, 1 for 1 for 3 or something like that. But still, no, he had more passing, he had more catches than he did carries, and that just kind of shows just his versatility in that offense. It's not like if Tony Pollard's in there, they're not going to do play action, they're not going to be looking, to the flat or to some, or for some kind of bubble screens and that kind of stuff. But I think that when you look at just the usefulness and his versatility as far as being a receiver as well, that's one of the things that Tajay Spears brings to the table consistently.
Yeah, we hope he is doing okay. The reports, at least initially, were saying high ankle sprain. So we'll see how that plays out for the rest of the offseason for Tajay Spears. Okay, on the other side of the break, we've talked a lot about the offense. We're going to talk about the defensive side of the ball, who stuck out, and what we're looking for, I guess, is they're going to Atlanta next here on the Titans Squad Show. Keep it here. All right, it's time to fuel up and turn it up with 5-Hour Energy Transfusion. It brings the bold grape ginger and thyme flavor of your favorite golf drink, minus the alcohol, into a quick energizing shot. Whether you're sinking birdies or just making memories with friends, this one's a hole-in-one for your energy game. Now, let's be honest, some days on the course or off of it, you just need that extra boost to stay sharp and energized. I know when I play golf, it's never pretty, so any energy I can get is certainly a help. And golf is all about good times with good people and good flavors, of course. The grape ginger lime flavor gives you the best parts of your clubhouse go-to without chasing down the Bev cart. If you go to 5hourenergy.com today, that is the number 5hourenergy.com, you can use my promo code LOCKEDONGolf to receive 20% off your order. This offer is valid until September 30th and on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Now, whether you're meeting up with friends or trying to turn 18 holes into 36, get energizing boost you need to power through. Order transfusion flavor 5-Hour Energy shots today. All right, B-Hop, we're back. We talked about the offensive side of the ball, Cam Ward, backup QB, running backs, and all that stuff, as well as the offensive line, but I wanted to chat about the defense. What were your big defensive takeaways from tonight? Of course, no Jeff Simmons.
Yeah.
No Tavondre Sweat. So they were kind of limited up front in the pass rush, but and Cody Barton was taken out early. So what were your kind of big takeaways there from tonight from the defensive side of the ball?
Didn't see a bunch from Arden Key. Didn't see a bunch from some guys that, on the outside are going to be responsible for bringing pressure. The lack of pressure is what made Kyle Trask look like a starter. You know what I mean? Dude's out there just diming it. You know what I mean? Making plays, rolling around, hitting receivers. Receivers were getting open. There's a lot going on in that first quarter, first couple of drives. I mean, I think they had a 17-play drive in there.
Yeah.
Held the ball for a ton of minutes, which meant that the defense couldn't get off the field. So am I really going to just get all ticked off about how the defense performed when they didn't have their best players out there, either in the secondary or up front? Cody Barton was out there, making some plays, but, at least Jihad Ward, former Illini baby, ILL.
There you go.
Got a pick. I think Warren Peoples got a pick, but either way, or got a not a pick, but a sack, which meant that there was some opportunity to get back there, but not a whole bunch. You know what I mean? Anytime you have a score like it is, 29-7, and most of the damage was done early on anyway. I think that after it was 10-7, the Titans obviously didn't get back on the scoreboard after that, and we saw the Tampa Bay Buccaneers start to run away with it a little bit. I saw Denard Wilson a couple times on that sideline, just like, Of course, you're doing that for those coachable moments. Not because you're looking at the guys that you're expecting to help you win this division out there, get on the field and not being competitive. Put it this way, that energy is completely different when Big Jeff's on the football field.
That's true.
Not just by action, but just by him saying, hey, look, as we stand here in this huddle before we break, y'all better be where you're supposed to be, period. You know what I'm saying? His level of accountability makes the defense play better. They're more inspired when you got guys that bring the energy. And that just wasn't, that wasn't the situation. Let's just say that, because those guys that are out there are just some of them just trying to make a roster, bro. Just trying to make enough plays, flying around and maybe making some hits, some tackles. But for the most part, I didn't see much because there really wasn't much expectation.
Right. I did like what James Williams brought to the table tonight. He 7 tackles, and he was the one who had the huge violent hit off the opening kickoff. That was probably one of the defensive highlights of the night for me. The other one, and I thought I was crazy hearing it because I felt like I heard Cedric Gray's name get called a lot on the broadcast. Yeah. And then Brian Callahan did talk about him after the game because he was getting a lot more opportunities, especially Cody Barton in like a limited role. He had 7 tackles tonight. So that's something when you're trying to develop the young inside linebacking core outside of Cody Barton, because that was the big question coming into this offseason. Who's going to play alongside him? James Williams seems to be the guy with the spot, but then you're giving guys like Cedric Gray an opportunity to play as well. What did you make of the inside linebackers there?
Well, you are going to have guys that play at different levels, you know what I mean? Because that's the way defense is. They rotate. Sometimes, most of the time, you don't see the Mike linebacker lead the field because he just, he just doesn't. But when you're talking about pressure packages, when you're talking about, holding down the interior, which is where they gash us a little bit, you've got to be consistent. You got to be in position. And, a lot of that just comes from understanding each other, and they'll get more reps together and start playing. They got to know each other's assignment, not getting out of position. That's the biggest thing about defense, is creating those crevices that allow the run game to be effective. You got to be where you're supposed to be, because a lot of times when a defense is doing the things that it does, if you're hitting this gap right here that and trust that the guy that's hitting the other gap, he's going to be there. Because if it's not, you got a gap that's been unfilled. Next thing you know, the offense is exploiting you, and they're converting first downs. And they're continuing to drive, and they're staying on it forever. Anytime you see a drive getting into double-digit plays, that's a bad thing for an offense or for a defense, because the offense is just wearing them down. You know what I mean? And they did run sometimes 6-7 straight runs. They weren't deviating from what was working. But the thing is, you also got to understand that when I'm actually able to deal with 3rd and 5 or 2nd and 3 or whatever else, I'm going to continue to run the football, because why do I sit here and put the ball in the air when I have such few yards to get to continue another drive? And the longer I take you into the snap count, the better it is for me as an offense. So that's just the way this thing works. But, the cover teams that you mentioned at the very beginning, they set the tone with that big stick, man, because they came flying down the field. And, I thought they're going to have a good return with that dynamic kick opportunity, whatever. I like it. I don't know what you think about it, but there's not a lot of movement when it comes to that. But it's still, you saw a big stick that got them popped up and got them energized. And, and actually, when Kyle Trask was making plays early on, they finally settled down a little bit and didn't give up a touchdown in that first drive when you thought, oh, boy, this is going to be a long day for the Titans, So kind of settled in a little bit, gave the offense another opportunity. Actually, after that first 3, it wasn't a 3 and out. I think they ran like 5 or 6 plays before they ended up settling for a field goal. The Titans going 3 and out didn't help much, because it was then that the Bucs were able to put a touchdown on the board and make it kind of, like, oh, wow, here we go. But it was that second drive, going back to the offense, that put it together to say, hey, look, we're here. Now it's 10-7 versus 10-0.
There was that defensive stance in the red zone at the end of I think it was the end of the first half, where Isaiah Rakes had the tipped ball at the line, and then they threw the end zone, and Mike Brown, I think it was Mike Brown who broke up that pass play. That was a nice little stand there at the end of the half to say, hey, we're going to hold you to at least. I think they held them to 3 at the end of the half there. So that was nice to see. We have one comment that I want to get to here. There we go. It's from Mr. Tony Ransom. How do you feel about the run defense? They gave up 178 on the ground tonight. What are your thoughts on that from Mr. Tony Ransom right here?
Obviously, we weren't at full strength there. You think they get 178 yards with Tavondre Sweat and Big Jeff at the 3 techniques? Not even a thought. You know what I mean? So, of course, they took advantage of not having the dudes that normally are tasked with stopping the run game. But like a smart offensive coordinator would do, if they're not stopping it, why am I going to stop doing it? You know what I mean?
Sure.
If you can't stop it, why would I stop it? So I'm going to keep running this ball right down your throat. It wasn't like we saw them stretching the line of scrimmage, getting a lot of toss sweeps, stretches, that kind of stuff like that. We just saw them, basically taking advantage between the tackles and just running downhill. And guys can't get off blocks, consistently. The job of most defensive linemen up front is to occupy the offensive linemen so they can't get to that next level. Because if the guards and the centers start working up to the linebacker level, then that means that guess who gets to make the tackles? The DBs. And if they're making tackles, either they're coming from distance to do it, or there was huge gains to be made, and that was an opportunity for an offense. And that's what we saw a lot more than I think that Titans fans were comfortable with.
Yeah, better take advantage of it now, because no Jeff Simmons, no Tavondre Sweat. You might as well, right? All right. On the other,
put it this way: them being on the sidelines, Julian, allowed you an opportunity to make some cash.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, Big Jeff's going to tap that helmet. I've been out here for 6 plays, man. You know what I mean? And I need a break. You know what I mean? And so somebody's got to come in there and fill in. Somebody's got to come in there and make a play, and then let Jeff get back out there.
That is a good point. I mean, the preseason, at the end of the day, it is about building the depth on your team.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. It is about getting so when that next man up possibility ends up happening, or you don't wish it happens, but if it has to happen, then the guys are as ready as they can be because they've seen it and been in game situations before.
I'm going to promo my series show tomorrow. Bill Lex and I are on the End Zone.
9-1.
Yep. And we have this segment called Ghostbusters 2. Ghostbusters was a classic movie, right?
Yes.
Ghostbusters 2 sucked.
No, it was not.
In certain NFL situations, is that a Ghostbusters situation or is that a Ghostbusters 2 situation? So tomorrow's question is, should starters play in the preseason? Is that a Ghostbusters or Ghostbusters 2 situation? So I asked my wife because I told her about it, and my wife actually is she runs the talent division for a tech company, and we're talking about just like her being an experienced HR person and how to can find executive roles. She doesn't need the reps because that's what she does. But someone that's more junior than her They need the reps to be able to get in there so I can trust that you can work with C-suite execs and be able to make the right hire. Same situation here. That was her analogy. I thought it was cute. But the same situation applies here. Why would the starters like Kevin Zeitler be in there when you're trying to build the back end of your roster, knowing that, first off, when the regular season starts, how often are you see these guys going to see the field? They won't, unless it's a bad situation where somebody got hurt. You know what I mean? So at the end of the day, this is their opportunity to shine. And they need to get in there on the field, get those reps in, that one, determine if they're good enough to make the 48 or 53 or whatever. Or, you know, like a lot of people recognize, you're not just out there on the football field performing for the team that you're wearing their colors. There are other teams that are looking at you because they're going to make cuts. Absolutely. And if you're better than what they have situationally, then they're going to look at you and say, hey, you know what? Hey, this guy out here, he was flying around on special teams for them. You know, he made some plays, some big catches for them, and he got released last week or yesterday. So what are we going to do? He's better than the guy we got. So you play for that. You just played for a few teams. As a matter of fact, if you think about it, you're playing for all 32 of them.
Got to have that next man up mentality. That's exactly what Corey Curtis did to me tonight, to have me host the pregame show and him be out in the actual game with the big timers over there. Anyway, so next on the Titans Squad show, we're going to talk about their trip to Atlanta, what we want to see as we wrap things up here on the Titans Squad show. Keep it here. All right, B-Hop. So the Titans are going to hit the road immediately to Atlanta, part of this 10-day road trip that they're on. They got joint practices with the Falcons to start the week before the preseason game. I believe it's next Friday here, and you can watch that here actually on my channel, WKRN News 2. Little plug there. So what do you want to see out of these next couple joint practices going into the next preseason game? Because they got their first sample taste of the joint practice to preseason game kind of combo here. So it's not going to be foreign to them. What are some of the things that you're looking for, especially now with the quick turnaround and recovery time from a game now back to practice?
I just want to see consistency. Consistency comes from making better the things that you did good and fixing the things that you didn't do good. That allows you to be consistent, right? So while we saw the front five offensively compete, and while we saw, you know, nice connections between Ward and Ridley, which we hope to see more of, maybe even expand that to some other receivers once they start taking away his favorite target. I just want to see them be consistent. There's no sense in us saying, yeah, you know what, Cam Ward got a B+ today, and then he gets a D against the Falcons. That shows inconsistency. Okay, when you run the 40 at the combine, okay, they're not particularly looking at the first score you put up. They want to see the average. Like if I run a 4.3 40 and then I back it up with a 4.6 40, what was wrong? You know what I mean? Versus me running a 4.6 40, then all of a sudden I run a 4.3 40. Like I was obviously sandbagging it. I was holding back.
Yeah.
That, you know, but that's a better situation to have. But what I don't want to see are those anomalies that don't show consistency. So I want to see them get better. The fact that this first offense that was out there didn't make any mental errors, that's great. Let's see it again. No mental errors. And you didn't see a bunch of flags. You know what I mean? This is usually the time when you see a lot of laundry on the carpet, you know, but we didn't see a lot of that today. There weren't a lot of guys jumping off sides, weren't a lot of guys holding, weren't a lot of guys being a liability and creating a worse situation for them offensively, right? So for offensively, I want to see them be consistent. Defensively, it's got to be more competitive. Given the situation, circumstances, I understand that. You know, you don't have your starters out there. But for the guys that are trying to make a team, just, you know, get into the playbook. Be trusted in the scheme. You know what I mean? That way you can get off the field on third down. I want to see more pressure. And I don't want to have them dial it up. Let's see if you can get there with 4. You know what I mean? It's great. If you can get there and let somebody beat somebody in a one-on-one situation, especially later on in the season when they start putting 4 hands on Big Jeff, somebody's got to be able to get freed up enough to take advantage of a one-on-one win. Because that's what most defensive coordinators would say. Win the one-on-ones. You know what I'm saying? Because when you do that, somebody's taking advantage somewhere else. You know what I mean?
The entire philosophy of this offseason, you mentioned like being consistent. removing any mistakes, self-inflicted errors, penalties, things like that. The whole offseason program is built around the sins, removing the sins, the self-inflicted negatives, as they like to call the plays that beat themselves. And that was what this whole, splitting everybody up into different teams, you getting points for certain things that helped your team, but negative points for things that hurt your team. That whole competition that the Titans have said, multiple Titans have said, hey, this was the most competitive offseason in a while. Well, let's see those sins translate to games. And then on the consistency front, B-Hop, I agree with you. I think it's putting, the full 60 minutes of a football game together week after week after week. With a young team, it reminds me of when we were talking about in the last show, how you look at the depth chart from an aerial view and how many young players, not just year one, but year two guys are going to be expected to make an impact on this team right away. And at least early on, it may be like this where you're saying, okay, there are going to be some good days. There are going to be some bad days, but that's part of this experience with dealing with at least a lot of the younger players. But the hope is that by the end of this preseason, these 3 games that they get, that they'll be able to show at least some sort of, hey, we can do it every single week consistency.
I like the fact that they've been on the road for 12 days.
Yes.
That's a hard situation to overcome or just to even deal with. And that draws them closer together. Nothing draws men closer together than doing hard stuff. You know what I mean? Men.
Chop down trees.
That's what I'm talking about. But Cali has created a collective culture, meaning that they understand how important each one of those pieces are. That's why you hear them say so much about the off-field stuff, right? Because the off-season creates a brotherhood, and you will definitely play harder for your brothers than you would a stranger. You know what I mean? Somebody you just don't know. So I like where they're going. I like the time being spent together. I like them competing against one another and supporting one another. I like the fact that them getting on the road in joint practices and playing against 2 teams on the road allows them to cheer for each other. You know what I mean? Because guess what? When my defense sees me out there as an offense making plays and they start cheering me, they're like, oh, Matt, you love it. You know what I mean? Then you feel inspired because your guys are inspired by what you're doing. So, that's what brings the band together is, looking at that situation, those circumstances, and going through the fire together.
And also playing different styles as well. They talked about that. Callahan talked about playing the Buccaneers, the Falcons, and the Vikings, because what's going to happen in that regular season? I mean, you look at those first 4 weeks of the regular season, it is a gauntlet when you have Denver, who is the best defense in the NFL last year, and then you go straight to McVay and the Rams. And then 2 weeks later, you got Houston. So not only the team bonding aspect where you're forced to be in a hotel with these guys and see them every single day and eat meals together and talk about, as Jelly Roll said on the hype video, talk about each other, get to know their grannies and their mamas and all that stuff, but also seeing the different styles on the field and how that could help you at least win football games on top of the big picture personnel character items that you were talking about, B-Hop.
I like having a tough schedule in the beginning because what that does, it sets the pace for preparation. If you got somebody really, really good to start the year out, you're going to make sure that you're prepared. You're going to cross T's, dot I's, go back over it, have ChatGPT look it over, make sure you didn't make any mistakes, all of the things. Versus go out there with a team that you should beat, you go out there with a level of expectation. But if you're talking about, man, hey, look, we have got to focus. We got to concentrate. We have to limit mistakes. Otherwise, this team is going to beat us. Because that's what, when you hear good coaches say, what do they always say? Good coaches always say, that team never beats you. You beat yourself. Because what it comes down to is a team that makes the least amount of mistakes has the best chance to win. So you got to be disciplined. You got to be focused. You got to be consistent.
I wanted to get to at least 1 or 2 comments before we call it a night here. This one is an interesting point brought up by Brett Downing. I like the starting O-line. I was super excited to see the weapons of wide receiver, tight end, but was let down. It doesn't help with the backup QB situation. For guys like an Xavier Restrepo who are trying to make this team, or even guys like Alec Iomanner or Chimdike who are trying to show as rookies what they could do, how do you do that if the quarterback situation the backup quarterback situation is what it is, at least in a game setting.
Yeah, there are some things that you can do to overcome the competition, right? It's as simple as making plays. When the ball is thrown to you, it's one thing if you don't get on the field. It's one thing if you don't get any targets. It's one thing if you just are never in a position to show just what you can actually do, how valuable you actually are. That sucks. And it's reality. It's part of it. But when you do get those chances to shine, when you're running that crossing route and you turn it into 20 extra yards after catch, when you put your face in there, you make that big stick that jars the ball loose, creates a fumble. Next thing you know, the offense got the ball back. When you do those things that make plays as a backup, that's what gets people noticing what you're doing, because then they'll expect you to do it again. And if you repeat it and it becomes consistent, now guess what? You get a raise. And that's what it's all about. And you get a raise because you're on the field more, because you're out there actually a part of the whole situation and you're making it happen. So, that's just an opportunity for them to go ahead and do what it is that they've been training all their lives to do.
And like you mentioned, they're not only training to potentially go or showing this, what they could do potentially to be on the Titans, but they're auditioning for the other 31 NFL teams out there for a job. Last thing before we go, wanted to get to another comment, and this was also from Brett Downing. He's got some good questions. What did you think of the special teams tonight? Because we haven't touched on that. They showed a lot of Coach John Fossil, which they did, and granted, he is the new member of the staff, but he is considered one of the best special teams coordinators in the game. What did you make of the special teams tonight? I will say, no fumbled kick returns or punt returns, which was nice.
Yeah, you can tell that John Fossil, fun of Big Jim, is a guy that pays attention to detail. And that level of accountability that he possesses makes you pay attention to detail. Because it'd be very easy on cover teams for guys to make mistakes, get out of their lanes, and all of a sudden here comes a big crevice that creates a big play on special teams. But also he's encouraging. How many times do we see him patting his guys on the back, meeting them on the field almost before they got to the sideline? Because
he wears cleats during practice. He digs his feet in the ground, man.
Get it? He's engaged. You see what I'm saying? He's engaged. Well, that's another thing. Think about that. Why is the cleats thing such a big deal? Because he's trying to show you what he wants you to do.
Yes.
Right? He's not just sitting there telling you. He's not, grossly overweight and breathing hard and looking like, why the hell would I listen to anything you say? There's no way in the world you can even do this stuff. Well, by me putting my cleats on, as a dad, it's one thing for me to tell you what to do, but how more effective is it if I'm sitting there showing you how to do it? Son, this is how you chop down a tree. And you pick up a damn axe and you go out there and chop a tree down. Now, guess what? Son respects you, and he's going to emulate what you did to cut that tree down, versus you sitting on the couch with the remote in your hand saying, hey, son, go out there and cut that tree down. He's like, okay, well, how do I do that? Well, just pick up the axe. Just start swinging. Versus the guy that goes out there, puts the safety equipment on, gets the gloves on, gets that big axe, and just starts wearing that tree out. Now I'm sitting there saying, man, this is a great teacher. This is someone I want to learn from. This is someone I respect.
Those are always my favorite coaches, even playing youth sports, the ones that I know that they could do it too, not the ones that were sitting on the sideline telling me to do something.
That's why player coaches are so important. You know what I mean? Now, look, not every player in the NFL is cut out to be a coach, because coaching is teaching, and not everybody's a good teacher. It's just the reality of it. But I know this, as a player, if you're in the coaching position, you've done two things. Now you become a teacher, and you've already got the experience of being a player. You know what I'm saying? So, and I'm not saying that you have to be a teacher to be, or you have to be a former player to be a good coach, because we see tons of them good coaches that never stepped on the football field like that, right? They just learned the game and developed into these people that, are helping players be better than they were without their instruction. But at the end of the day, if Deion Sanders becomes a head coach somewhere and he shows you and tells you and teaches you the things that made him a Hall of Famer, isn't that the best situation that you can have?
Absolutely. 1,000%. That's B-Hop right there, not just a two-time Pro Bowler and a football analyst, but a chopper down of trees. He's probably having a good day if you see him in the forest chopping down trees. All right, well, we're going to end on that note here. It's getting late. We're getting loopy. Titans fall in their first preseason game, 29-7. But as we talked about, a lot to look forward to. It's just preseason game number 1. We'll have another one to talk about next week. For now, you could listen to us wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify. You're here YouTube live on game days and every Tuesday. At least that's the tentative schedule right now. You can also catch the Locked On Titans podcast wherever you get your podcasts. That's here on the Locked On Network. But for now, I'm Julian Minensone. You know that guy over there. That's Brad Hopkins. We'll see you guys in a little bit.